When I was younger, I used to go to a lot of underground rock and heavy metal concerts and concerts by mainstream acts as well, but mostly like heavy underground hard stuff, mosh pit, slam pit kind of stuff. And I even did security here and there. And one time I was doing security at was actually a restaurant, and this girl came in, or this woman, I should say, and she looked a lot like this woman right here. This isn't her. I don't know who this person is. I just Googled, Nazi punks fuck off, and she came up. But this woman looked a lot like this that came in, and she had this same sort of demeanor, and she was wearing this same shirt. And she was very much with this exact kind of attitude. She was like a little bit unhinged, you could say, but her demeanor calmed when she saw me, and she was definitely flirting with me and complimenting me and stuff. And one thing I figured out pretty quick is that a lot of times people who are the most nice to you when you're doing security somewhere, these are the people that are going to start a problem. And what they're doing is they're trying to get on your good side right away because somewhere in their brain, they know they're going to be a problem. They either consciously plan it or they just do it subconsciously. I don't know. Some people don't realize how they appear, how unhinged and how obviously unhinged they appear when they go get into a room. I'm sure we've all experienced this. Everyone will be sitting in a room or a restaurant or whatever, kind of, somewhat peaceful, and someone real crazy will come in and everyone will be like, whoa, I hope that person doesn't sit next to me, or someone might get triggered and want to, kick that person's ass or challenge them. So anyway, this girl had this Nazi punks fuck off shirt, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, you're kind of like the most loud, obnoxious, you could say annoying person in here right now, and you're making this kind of like statement. What is this statement you're making? Is the statement that I'm really against Nazis, and I'm so against Nazis that I'm going to express it really loudly because I don't want people who like Nazis to feel safe. And that's fine. I don't like Nazis either. I don't need to wear a shirt that says I hate Nazis. But if you're in an environment where there's lots of Nazis, this shirt makes sense. You're basically saying, fuck you. I don't support your hate, you know. But if you're in a place where there's no Nazis, it's kind of like you're screaming to the converted in a way, you know. And I feel like this, you got to understand, this person caused problems. This person came in by herself and she started sitting next to people and striking up conversations. And then, like, next thing you know, she's eating their fries off their plate and trying to get people to buy her drinks. And she's moving from table to table. And I'm thinking, this is some kind of like grifter or just psychotic person. And some people were cool with her because she was kind of cute. But others were I could tell, were getting a little annoyed. So, I had to kick her out. But this thing about using how do I say this? Like, I feel like she was using the shirt as a sort of armor or almost like a weapon, like, I've got the moral high ground here. So therefore, if I start a fight, people are going to be on my side because I'm the one who hates Nazis and I'm the better person. I'm the good person. Maybe the phrase I'm looking for is virtue signaling. I'm announcing my high virtue, my how very unracist I am. And it's fine. I don't have any problem with it. But it's like when you try to shove it down people's throats in order to sort of get away with behaving badly and sort of using that as excuse, but I'm a good guy, but I'm a good person. I hate Nazis. Well, I don't care. You're acting like an asshole. You can't get away with acting like an asshole just because you're wearing a I hate Nazis shirt. You may not be a Nazi, but you're an asshole and you're annoying. And people don't like you and you're a grifter on top of it. And it's almost like she thought this Nazi punks fuck off shirt was kind of like a badge to do what she wanted. And when that didn't work, she kind of stormed out in a somewhat unhinged manner, and it just sort of exposed who the person is. let me give a different example of what I'm sort of building up to here. You know, this is, you can see this is some sort of mosh pit here. You know, the ones I used to be in usually was a circular pit. And what would happen is it was survival of the fittest. And if there was a couple big guys in the pit who were assholes and liked, there were people who went to concerts, especially the heavier bands like, you know, Cro-Mags or Exodus. There were bands that had reputations for tough mosh pits, and big guys who liked to punch people, they liked going to those shows because they knew there was going to be a lot of people that they could beat on and they could probably get away with it. And this guy looks like he might be trying to break up a fight, but you know, there'd be a guy like this or someone kind of sketchy looking, or one or two guys that would just start beating on people really hard. And then the pit, there would just be a big open circle with like two or three guys in the middle of it. And because nobody would want to go in the pit because like, oh shit, that guy's going to, you know, knock me real hard. And then if I knock him back, he's going to beat my ass. It was kind of what was going on. So it was a real show of dominance. It's like a macho thing. But guys who like to hit and like to fight, you know, they sure liked doing that, you know, that show of strength in the pit. But, you know, what would happen is, I think after enough times of getting beaten down or thrown out of a club, these bullies realized they had to switch their tactics. You know, oh, I can't just beat on people, but if I put on this Nazi punks fuck off shirt, and now I'm going to only beat on Nazis. You know, it's like, you know, if you're a bully and you like beating on people, you're going to beat on them for any reason. A lot of the youth are wild, especially the lower income, and they will think of any reason to pick on someone just because they're different. So some of these bullies realized that, well, I need to have the moral authority. In other words, you know, I can't just beat up people indiscriminately. I have to have a good reason, and then I'll have like the people behind me. So I'm going to wear a Nazi punks fuck off shirt, and I'm going to only beat up Nazis. You know, the problem is, you know, you start beating on some guy just because he's bald and maybe has a, you know, a USA flag on his tattooed on his arm. Oh, that guy's a Nazi. Let's beat his ass. But what if that guy isn't a Nazi? What if he just happens to you know, be a skinhead who loves his country? In fact, the original skinheads, if you look at the history, they were actually an ethnically diverse scene in London, England, if you look into it. So the point I'm trying to make is that, you know, people will find any excuse to behave badly, whether it's in the name of religion, in the name of some kind of virtue, whatever, anti-racism, anti-this, anti-that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that their heart is in it. Some people just basically want a badge to behave badly, like almost like troops, like waiting for someone to make the wrong move or say the wrong thing. Oh, say the wrong thing, I'll beat your ass. Like, okay, now you're really no different than any other bully or a group of bullies or, you know, dare I say, Gestapo. So Nazi Punks Fuck Off was a song by the Dead Kennedys, which came out in the very early 80s, San Francisco band. And if you read the background of this song, I guess they were mainly basically using Nazi as a loose word for assholes that start fights in the pit. And if you look at the lyrics, you can kind of see it here. Punk ain't no religious cult. Punk means thinking for yourself. You ain't hardcore when you spike your hair, when a jock still lives inside your head. So Jello Biafra seems to be pointing that person out. Like, you're just a bully coming to hardcore shows to beat people up, and you're just wearing the costume so you can get away with it. If you've come to fight, get out of here. You ain't no better than the bouncers. We ain't trying to be police. If you ape the cops, it ain't anarchy. West Coast punk being very anti-cop at the time. If you look into Black Flag's history, there's a very intense history with cops. I've got my own theories about that. I wasn't there. I don't know. But I just wonder if the punks were being radicalized by some sort of outside force in order to create chaos with society and sort of erode law and order. But that's something I talk about in other blogs. I think it was called Gleaming the Cube, where I talk about that a lot more. 10 guys jump one. What a man. You fight each other, the police state wins. Stab your backs when you trash our halls. Trash a bank if you've got real balls. You still think look cool. The real Nazis run your schools. That's interesting. The real Nazis run your schools. We're seeing a lot of political demonstrations at schools right now, especially universities. A lot of it very far left. And a lot of these far left agitators are pointing, screaming towards the right and going, we're doing this against you and it's all your fault. We're fighting fascism and we're fighting Nazism, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, there's a very anti-Israel sentiment running through all of this. Anyway, these thoughts are just coming to mind as I'm reading this. Nazi punks, fuck off. You'll be the first to go. You'll be the first to go. I think they're kind of saying that in the real Fourth Reich, well, he's saying it right here, they'd go after you first. And again, there's another parallel. If you look into Hamas and extreme Muslim, Sharia law, they don't tolerate homosexuality. They don't believe in women's rights. So I guess ultimately what I'm getting at here is that there's a lot of rhetoric out there, symbols being put out there that sort of are supposed to stand for something morally better, have the moral high ground. But where the moral high ground really happens is when we can stop and actually have a conversation. And if we have differences, talk them out like civilized human beings instead of just pulling out guns and knives and just fighting each other over the drop of the hat when the truth is we're more alike than we are different. And unfortunately, I do think there are a lot of agitators out there. In other words, people and groups of people actually getting paid to go to political rallies and again, for the purpose of creating chaos in society, lawlessness. And a lot of these groups will claim to be to believe in free speech and the Constitution and the freedom, and they will claim this is what they're fighting for when they're actually behaving kind of like Nazis themselves. And I think the antidote to this, again, nonviolence, talk, conversation, the ability to listen to someone who has a different point of view than yours, and the ability to articulate your point of view clearly. And if there's an inconsistency there, or someone points something out that contradicts something you believe, look into it. Am I wrong? It's okay to ask yourself if you're wrong. It's really about the truth. And some people really aren't interested in the truth. Bullies don't care about the truth. Bullies just want to fight. They just want to feel powerful. They just want to beat someone up. And, when society starts condoning and elevating a chaotic, throw your fists for what you believe real fast kind of attitude, unfortunately, it becomes more normalized. There's less dialogue and more just like pack mentality. Oh, we all think this way, so you think that way, so therefore we can't talk. We can only scream at each other or fight. In my experience, I've noticed that it's white people who seem the most paranoid about being accused of being racist. And some of this probably it's probably a remnant from World War II, obviously the Nazis. But because of America's racist past, there's still a lot of tension between blacks and whites that will not heal because the mainstream media and the powers that be, they don't want it to heal because it's a really potent way to keep division in society. So I talk about this a lot because I really do think it's maybe the number one thing preventing America for being a more unified, stronger nation, is that blacks and whites don't feel like they can come together. If blacks, speak English too proper and too well, they think they're being too white and they're selling their culture out. And if whites, dance too good or speak in quote unquote Ebonics, they're a Wigga, and so they hate themselves and they're ashamed. So I would highly recommend reading the work of Thomas Sowell. Now, this is someone a lot of people really don't like because he's highly intelligent and he articulates the social issues, especially within black culture, in a very articulate way, and it pisses people off because they don't like hearing the truth. They don't like hearing this stuff articulated with regard to race. You're only supposed to say this and that. You're supposed to say that, you know, all blacks are oppressed and all whites believe that they're privileged or they have white guilt. And perhaps the most interesting thing that he lays out in a lot of his work is that what we call ebonics today, or quote unquote, black talk, the way American blacks talk. And Thomas Sowell traces this to the South, of course, the old slavery era, but also to sort of redneck white Britain and Scotland. And he goes way into the cultures and what was written about those cultures back in the day. And he connects it to norms in black society in ways that, might disturb a lot of people, because a lot of quote unquote black culture that is promoted in hip hop and stuff in the mainstream is the exact sort of behavior that Thomas Sowell traces back to these sort of crackers, these ghetto white people. And he basically presents a very compelling case using statistics and writings to show that this is a perpetuation of something from way back. And I think this is something that both blacks and whites should come together and understand, because if they did, they might understand each other a little better, and it might break down some of the barriers that hold us both back in certain ways. I want to do a longer video on this topic pretty soon, because I think it's very important, and not enough people have heard Thomas Sowell's, I think, very important point of view.